The judge was already reaching for his pen. That single movement, small, ordinary, almost unnoticeable, felt louder than anything I had heard in my life. It meant the arguments were over. It meant the decision was coming. It meant that everything I had spent years building, protecting, loving, and surviving for was about to be reduced to a few sentences spoken by a man in a black robe. Across the courtroom, my ex-husband sat back in his chair and smiled. Not a wide smile. Not a cruel one. Just a calm, controlled curve of the lips, the smile of someone who believes the outcome is already decided. His lawyer leaned toward him and whispered something. He nodded once, slow and confident, like a chess player watching the board tip inevitably in his favor. I stared at the wood grain of the table in front of me because I was afraid that if I looked up, I would break. This wasn't how divorce was supposed to look. At least, not how I had imagined it back when I still believed love was permanent. Back when I thought disagreements ended in conversations, not courtrooms. But somewhere between the late-night arguments, the unexplained absences, and the quiet way my marriage unraveled, things had changed. By the time he filed for divorce, it wasn't just about ending a relationship. It was about winning. For months, my ex had been building his case brick by brick. Not loudly. Not angrily.
Carefully. Strategically.
He gathered witnesses who barely knew our home but spoke confidently about my emotional instability. He collected moments of my exhaustion and presented them as patterns. He took the nights I cried after he left and turned them into episodes. He took my vulnerability and wrapped it in legal language until it sounded dangerous. And worst of all, it worked. Every hearing chipped away at me. Every affidavit felt like a public dissection of my pain. I learned quickly that in court, context doesn't matter as much as control. The person who stays calm looks credible. The person who shows emotion looks guilty, or worse, unstable. I tried to stay calm. I practiced my breathing in the mirror before every hearing. I told myself that if I just stayed composed, if I spoke clearly, if I didn't cry, the truth would be enough. But truth doesn't always win when it's quiet. Sometimes it gets drowned out by confidence and paperwork. That morning, the final custody hearing felt different. He had brought everything. 2 witnesses sat behind him, a former coworker and a woman he introduced as a family friend. I barely recognized either of them. His lawyer laid out their testimony with smooth precision. They spoke about my mood swings, about how I created tension, about how the home environment had been unpredictable. No one mentioned why I was exhausted. No one mentioned the nights I stayed awake waiting for him to come home. No one mentioned the way my daughter clung to me when her father stopped showing up for school events, birthdays, bedtime routines. They talked as if the marriage existed in a vacuum, detached from cause and effect. Then came the closing statements. My ex's lawyer stood, adjusted his suit jacket, and spoke in a tone so calm it made my stomach twist. He framed the argument as concern, as responsibility, as doing what's best for the child. He emphasized stability, structure,
consistency.
And then he looked directly at the judge and said, "Given the evidence presented, it's clear that my client offers a calmer, more stable environment."
Calmer.
I almost laughed, because calm is easy when you're the one causing the storm. When he finished, the courtroom went quiet. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes scanning his notes. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. My lawyer sat still beside me, his face unreadable, but I could see the tension in his jaw. I knew that look on the judge's face. It was the look of someone who had already decided. Beside me, my daughter sat quietly. She was 7 years old, small for her age, her feet dangling above the floor, because the chair was too high. She wore a simple dress and held her backpack tightly in her lap, fingers wrapped around the straps like it was an anchor. Inside was her stuffed rabbit, the one she'd slept with since she was 3, the one she took with her whenever she felt unsafe. I had debated bringing her that day. Part of me wanted to shield her from everything, to let her wait outside with a relative, to protect her from the cold language of courtrooms and the sharp edges of adult conflict. But the hearing was about her, about where she would live, about who she would belong to. So she was there. And I told myself she didn't understand. I told myself she was just tired. I told myself she was playing quietly in her own little world while the adults decided her future. I was wrong. The judge cleared his throat. I am prepared to make a ruling, he said. The words hit me like a physical blow. My hands trembled under the table. I pressed my nails into my palm, grounding myself, reminding myself to breathe. I thought of our apartment, of my daughter's room with the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, of our bedtime routine, of the way she still asked me to sit beside her until she fell asleep. I wondered how you explained to a child that a judge decided she wouldn't come home with you anymore. Then I felt it, a small squeeze on my hand. I looked down. My daughter had stopped swinging her legs.
She wasn't looking at me.
She was staring straight ahead, eyes fixed on the judge with an intensity that didn't belong to a child her age. "Mom," she whispered, barely audible. "I need to say something." My heart skipped. Before I could respond, before I could stop her, she slipped her hand out of mine and stood up. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor cut through the room like a blade. Heads turned. Murmurs rippled across the benches. My ex's lawyer frowned sharply. My ex's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. Children don't speak in custody hearings. Everyone knows that. I reached out instinctively, panic rising in my chest. "Sweetheart." But she had already taken a step forward. She stood there, small and straight, shoulders squared, hands clenched at her sides. She didn't look scared. She looked determined. "Your Honor," she said, her voice soft but steady, "please, let me show you the truth." The courtroom froze. The judge blinked, clearly startled. My ex's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is highly inappropriate." The judge raised his hand. "Sit down," he said. Silence returned, thicker than before. He leaned forward slightly, studying my daughter with an expression that had shifted from authority to curiosity. "What is it you want to show me?" My daughter swallowed. She turned, walked back to her chair, and opened her backpack. From inside, she pulled out an old phone. The screen was cracked across one corner. The case was scuffed and faded. I recognized it immediately. It was a phone my ex had given her months earlier, claiming it was just for games and cartoons. I hadn't thought twice about it. It seemed harmless. "I recorded something," she said quietly. "I didn't know if it was important, but Daddy told me not to tell anyone." The color drained from my ex's face. Not all at once. Slowly, like something leaking out of him. The judge straightened. "Bring it here." The bailiff stepped forward and gently took the phone from my daughter's hands. She watched it leave her grip, her face pale but resolute. The device was placed in front of the judge. My ex shifted in his seat, suddenly restless. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but the judge ignored him. When the screen lit up, the courtroom went completely silent. The video was shaky, low angle, clearly filmed by small hands. It showed our kitchen late at night. The lights were dim. My ex sat at the table, laughing, a drink in his hand. Across from him sat a woman I had never seen before. Her voice was clear. "I'll say whatever you want in court," she said casually, "if it helps your case." My ex laughed. "Good. As long as they believe she's unstable." A gasp rippled through the room. My stomach dropped. My breath caught in my throat. The judge didn't move. The video continued. My ex talked freely. About exaggerating my breakdowns. About how judges always side with the calmer parent. About coaching testimony. About telling my daughter what to say and what not to say. Then came the words that shattered me. "Don't tell Mommy," he said on the recording. "This is our secret." The video ended. The screen went dark. No one spoke. The silence was absolute, not the awkward kind, not the tense kind, but the kind that follows something irreversible. The judge stared at the phone for a long moment. Then he slowly looked up. "Did you record this yourself?" he asked my daughter. She nodded. "I didn't want Mommy to lose me. That was all it took." The judge's expression hardened. He turned to my ex. "You will remain seated." Then to the lawyer. Your witnesses are dismissed. Their testimony is compromised. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that day. The ruling changed in minutes. Testimony discredited. Evidence accepted. Custody reconsidered. Sanctions discussed. Everything my ex had carefully built over months collapsed under the weight of one truth spoken by a child. But the most important moment didn't happen when the judge spoke. It happened afterward. When the courtroom emptied and my daughter walked back to me, she wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "I told the truth." I held her and cried. Not from fear. From relief.
From awe.
My ex thought he was winning because he had lawyers, confidence, and control. He lost because he underestimated the courage of a child. And in that courtroom, it wasn't the loudest voice that mattered. It was the smallest one that spoke the truth.